And you see, he begins this poem emphatically. I say emphatically because he says, no, no, go not to Lethe. Thrice, he used 3 negatives, no, no, and then not. In fact, 4 negatives, if you also count neither. So he uses these 4 negatives to emphasize what not to do. So in this stanza, in the opening lines, he's telling those people who are experiencing melancholy, who are experiencing sadness, who are experiencing depression, he's asking them, is forbidding them not to go to Lethe. He says, no, no, go not to Lethe. And Lethe, now this is the 3rd time we've come across it, and you should know by now that it is a river of forgetfulness in Hades, which is the underworld. Hades is another name for the underworld in Greek myth. So he says, go not to Lethe. Do not attempt to drink from the river of Lethe. Do not attempt to forget, because remember, whoever drank or took bath in this river Lethe, I told you that he experiences forgetfulness. All his previous memories are washed away, and all the previous lives, memories of the previous lives are washed away. So he says, he's using Lethe as a metaphor to say that don't seek forgetfulness. Don't use means or don't use such drugs which may cause you to forget your past, which may cause you to forget your past life, which may cause to eradicate, to evaporate your past memories. So he says, go not to Lethe. Don't seek help of forgetfulness when you are depressed, when you are melancholic, or when you are sad. Neither twist wolf's bane tight-rooted for its poisonous wine. Now the second object that he mentions is wolf's bane. And wolf's bane is a poisonous plant. It's a poisonous plant, and it contains sedatives. So it's like a very, very strong drug, which when taken in large quantities can actually become poisonous and cause death. So he says, don't twist the wolf's bane. It is known for its roots, which are tightly wound around, tight-rooted, and when they are squeezed or when they are crushed, the juices that it gives out, that is what makes the poisonous wine or the poisonous juice of wolf's bane. So he says, don't twist wolf's bane. Don't don't use the wine, the poisonous juices of this poisonous plant to forget your worries, to end your depressions. Nor suffer thy pale forehead to be kissed by nightshade. Nightshade, it is another herb, it's another plant which induces forgetfulness, which induces sedation. So he says, nor even try to use the leaves of the nightshade. The leaves of the nightshade, when they are rubbed against the forehead, they induce sleep. They induce, a loss of memory. They induce forgetfulness. So he says, don't use any of these things. Don't use any method, or these methods, or any other method. Don't seek the help of drugs. Because Keats was fond of Greek myths, he's employing here his knowledge of Greek myths. And he's also employing his, as we see here, his knowledge of botany, but primarily the Greek myth, as we see here. In Greek myth, these plants were supposed to have some poisonous sedative effects. So then this is what we call or describe as Keats's Hellenism. This is his Hellenism. He is using Greek myths to tell you what not to do, what not to use when you're melancholic. But you can extend it to any object, to any drug, any kind of drug that is used when you are in a melancholic state of mind. When you use a drug to induce forgetfulness, or to forget your past life, or to forget your past experience, or to forget what happened to you, or the memory of that sad event or melancholic event which is causing that state. He says, don't use any drug to get rid of that melancholic state of mind that you are in. And then he describes nightshade as the ruby grape of Proserpine. Proserpine was the queen of underworld. She was a daughter of Demeter, but she was taken by Pluto. Pluto was a god of underworld. She was taken by Pluto to be his queen. So Proserpine was fond of nightshade. So this was her weapon, in fact, with which she, sometimes induced sleep. So in these 4 lines, you see he's telling you not to take help from drugs to cause forgetfulness or to get rid of melancholy. And next Keats says, make not your rosary of yewberries. He says, he wants us not to make rosaries of yewberries. Yewberries are symbol of mourning, and rosary is a string of beads, as you know, which we count as we are reciting something. So he wants the person who's melancholic, who's sad, and who's in depression, not to be always thinking, not to be always contemplating about melancholy or his sadness. Because when we are using tasbih, or when we are using a rosary, what we are doing is that we are constantly reminding ourselves of that act. We are reciting something and we are counting rosary, the beads, moving the beads. So he says, but when a melancholic person, when he is contemplating and thinking of death all the time, he compares his contemplation to the contemplation of someone who uses rosary for a spiritual ascendancy. So he says, make not your rosary of yewberries. Don't always contemplate or think about melancholy or sadness. And then, nor let the beetle, nor the death moth be your mournful psyche. Then he talks about the objects of death. He talks about some symbols of death. And again the message is that the melancholic person should not think all the time about death objects, should not contemplate about objects of death, because a person who is really melancholic or sad, because he sees no happiness in life, he sees no joy in life, he wants to leave this life, he wants to be dead actually, he wants to embrace death. So he's thinking about death, he thinks how it would be when he's dead and when he's free from these worries. And this is what he forbids. He says, don't let the image of beetle come near you. Beetle is a black insect which normally lives on the barks or the trunks of the trees. We can't locate it exactly. We don't see it often also, but you see it coming down see it sometimes near the plants, and it's got a hard shell, shiny black shell, and you see it near the light, hiding from the light towards the evening time. But it is its constant irritating and monotonous sound which we hear in the evening times or in the summer afternoons. So he says that beetle, which actually for the Egyptians, for ancient Egyptians, it was an object to be worshipped, and they used to worship it because they believed that it was a symbol of the resurrection of soul. They believed in the resurrection of soul. This was why they placed the sacred scarab, which was a beetle. They placed it in the coffins with the dead, because they believed that this beetle or this scarab, it helped take the soul from this world to the other world. So it played a significant role for the Egyptians, and it was a sacred creature, sacred insect for the Egyptians. So, but Keats here uses this as a symbol of death, because with the image of beetle is associated all this scene of death. So he says, don't think about beetle, or don't even think about the death moth. Now moths also come out in the night time, we see them around light. They're patanga. It's not exactly patanga, but it is that is slimmer and smaller. A moth is slightly bigger, and it's got thicker and bigger leaves. But it also has a short life, and it also hovers near light. But this particular moth, death moth, in classical myth, it over its body, it carries a pattern which resembles a skull. This is why it is called the death moth. And in classical myths, actually, it is symbolized as a butterfly. In most of the new Hollywood movies, you may also have come across this idea of the moth or the butterfly used as a symbol of a soul, used as a symbol of resurrection of soul. In most of the works or the movies, they have shown how when the body has died and the soul is still living on this, is left behind in this world, or when someone has been murdered or killed without justice being done to him, so or is killed injustly, so the soul of that person, it hovers on the earth. So the writers or the dramatists, they show that how the image of the butterfly or the moth, through that those souls, they try and communicate with the living world, with us. So it is a symbol of soul. It is a symbol of the resurrection of soul. And in Greek classical myth, the moth or the butterfly, it symbolized the soul itself. It symbolized the soul itself, because the soul communicated with the human world through the butterfly or through the moth. And this is a belief which is also common in many cultures around the world, even now. Even now. You may be surprised to know that, but maybe in some really tribal cultures in our part of the world, or in our country also, you may come across such myths which are quite strong amongst people. So Keats here is trying to, here is trying to link these images to the Egyptians or the classical Greek society, where they were seen as symbols of, associated with death, ideas of death. So he says, don't think about the objects of death. Don't think about death at all. Because he says, nor the death moth be your mournful psyche. So don't let them become your mournful psyche. Psyche in Greek myth was a goddess of beauty. She was loved by Cupid, and Cupid, was in Greek myth is the god of love. So the god of love falls in love with this princess of beauty, and which is Psyche. And after a long story, they eventually marry. And literally, the word in Greek myth means soul or breath of life, while Cupid in Greek myth means desire. So he says, not let your soul become like be burdened by melancholy. Not let it be taken over by sadness and gloominess or melancholy. Then he doesn't stop here. He creates further images for you. He says, nor the downy owl, a partner in your sorrow's mysteries, for shade to shade will come too drowsily and drown the wakeful anguish of the soul. A downy owl, that's another mythical creature that is, but it is this particular owl. It's a kind of an owl. It is associated mostly with with images of horror. And it ranks with rats and spiders as the most celebrated of the Halloween creatures. Halloween night, must have heard of. Halloween night is celebrated on the 31st of October around the world, and it is a special night in which they believe that all of these supernatural and creatures, they come out, and so humans celebrate their coming. by dressing up like them. It happens in the West, but not in our culture. So he says, not let these things, for shade to shade will come. Shade to shade will come. What will come? He's talking about melancholy. He says, if you let it overcome you, it will come from shade to shade. It will come and possess your soul. Melancholy, if you allow yourself to contemplate, to think about objects of death, or to think about drugs to achieve forgetfulness, or to escape from your worries, he says, you will be overcome completely, or your soul will be taken over completely by melancholy. And then you will have no success, and then you will find no way out of its clutches, and drown the wakeful anguish, and you will drown yourself in complete anguish, in complete pain. So the image is of a melancholy like some evil spirit that will take hold of you. He says, don't let melancholy take hold of you, but melancholy will surely take hold of you, will surely possess your soul if you think about taking drugs to get rid of your memories, or if you think about the death objects because you're thinking about death. He says, if you keep on thinking about on these lines, melancholy will eventually take hold of you and will burn you in anguish, will burn you in complete pain. So this was first stanza, which in which he employed lots of Greek images and myths. The second stanza will be lighter, so you will not have problem understanding it. He says, but when the melancholy fit shall fall, sudden from heaven like a weeping cloud, that fosters the droop-headed flowers all, and hides the green hill in an April shroud. He says, but when the melancholy fit shall fall sudden from heaven like a weeping cloud. He says, but when the melancholy fit is over, when this fit of melancholy, when it is over. He says, when it falls suddenly, it evaporates suddenly, it is over suddenly, and then he gives you a simile. He says, suddenly like a cloud from heaven weeps. So he's gives you an image of a cloud weeping, or a cloud which bursts with showers of rain. He says, and the result of that rain is that fosters, it fosters meaning it gives life, it fosters, it gives life to the drooping headed flowers, the flowers which are drooping, flowers which are also sad, flowers which are also melancholic, flowers which are also gloomy, drooping. Drooping is a low head, looking downwards, and due to extreme tire or due to some extreme sadness, but lacking energy or happiness or vitality or color. So he says, the flowers which were before rain, half dead, with this sudden shower of rain, due to the weeping cloud. The cloud is personified here. It's as like a person who is weeping. He says when the clouds burst with rain, the flowers come full of life. They become full of life, and hides the green hill in an April shroud. And he says, as a result of the rain, the whole hill is covered in a green April shroud. Shroud is a cloth. He says the whole hill is covered by the green cloth under the effect of the April showers. So you see how what he's trying to tell you here. He says, just like suddenly a cloud bursts into rain and it gives life to the flowers which were dead, to the plants which were dead, and it gives life to the vegetation that was dead, and everything becomes green, the grass becomes green, and the flowers start blooming. He says, in the same way, when your fit of melancholy, when your fit of depression, when your fit of sadness is over, so you too, he says, will experience joy, will experience a revival of energy, will experience a force of of energy, will experience a force of happiness. So in that sense, he is trying to connect to you how joy is related to melancholy. And then he says, then glut thy sorrow on a morning rose, or on the rainbow of the salt sand wave, or on the wealth of globe peonies. Now he gives you images of, I have highlighted all three of those images. He talks about these different images of from nature. First is morning rose, then salt sand wave, and then globe peonies. Okay, and glut means, you know, to your fullest. He says, glut thy sorrow. So feel happy when that happens, when the fit of melancholy falls, then and your sorrows are over. You enjoy to your fullest what he says on a morning rose. Enjoy the beauty of the morning rose. He says, and leave the sorrows, leave the sorrow also for the morning rose, because you see, the morning rose is a special kind of a rose which has a short life. It blooms for a while. As the day progresses, it decays easily. And then he talks about the sand wave now, and this rainbow, not the rainbow in the sky, but the rainbow that is created on the wave. On the wave near the beaches, he says, even that is short-lived. It's also temporary. It's as temporary as the morning wave. And globe peonies. Peonies is a flower which is around. They are called globe because of their round shape, and they also open for a while. When they are struck by the sunlight, they open, but they close when they don't get the sunlight. All of these, he says, they are temporary. They have short life. They're short-lived. He says, so look at, take strength from these images of nature. Take strength from them, because a morning rose gives beauty. It, although it hides the sorrowful feeling, it all hides the fact that it is just for a while, that its beauty is temporary. Yet it gives out beauty. In the same way, the rainbow is also for a short while. The rainbow which is made on the waves, on the sea waves, ocean waves, that's also for a while. But it pleases the heart. It gives joy to the heart. And then he says, the peonies, when they bloom in full sunlight, they also bloom for a while. They also bloom for a short time, but they are also, but they give joy. So all these beautiful scenes, he takes strength. He's asking you to take strength from these beautiful images of nature, which though they are temporary, but they give joy. So joy and sadness, joy and sorrow are interconnected. Joy and sorrow are linked. Okay, so you see through these images, this is what he's trying to show. There is sorrow in the idea that their lives are temporary, that their lives are short, but they are beautiful. They are objects of beauty. They are objects of beauty that inspires, that gives happiness, that gives joy, that lightens burden. So he's trying to interconnect both for you. Or if thy mistress some rich anger shows, imprison her soft hand and let her rave, and feed deep, deep upon her peerless eyes. Now he creates another totally different experience for you. But you must not be surprised, because if you know Keats well by now, you must know that he couldn't ever let go of the idea of love. It was so special for him. So once again he makes space for his beloved and for that feeling of love that he so cherished. So he says, if your beloved, if your mistress is angry with you and she shows some rich anger, don't be saddened don't go into a fit of melancholy, don't become depressed. Now he suggests some other thing to you. He's allowing you to get he's telling you how to get joy out of sorrow. Now the anger of the beloved causes sorrow. It eats away the heart. It causes you to lament. It causes you to feel guilty. It causes you to go into bouts of depression. But he says don't feel melancholic or saddened. Instead, seek strength, seek courage, seek happiness. How? He says, imprison her soft hand, take her hands in your take her hand in your hands, and let her speak angrily. Let her rave. Rave is anger. So he says, let her show her anger. But you, meanwhile, look deep, deep into her peerless eyes. Peerless means matchless. Peerless is extremely beautiful because they are matchless. They are unmatched by any. So he says, peer or look into her beautiful eyes and enjoy the beauty of her eyes and seek pleasure and joy out of that beauty and forget about her anger. So in this stanza, he's told you how to cope with melancholy, how to cope with sadness, how to cope with depression. He gives you images from nature, and then he gives you an image of the beloved. But he tells you how to cope with your melancholy. So like a physician, like a doctor, like a psychiatrist, he's still telling you how to heal your wound and how to come out of that melancholic state. And then in stanza 3, he has another idea. He says, she dwells with beauty, beauty that must die, and joy, whose hand is ever at his lips, bidding adieu, and aching pleasure nigh, turning to poison while the bee mouth sips. And these are oft-quoted lines also. Keats says, she dwells with beauty. She here is melancholy. And I told you that melancholy in the first stanza, it was, it is pictured as some, evil spirit. So he talks about, he's personified it, and he uses the word she for it. He says, she dwells with beauty. Melancholy lives with beauty. The dwelling of melancholy is with beauty. He says, and beauty, the sad truth is that beauty is to die. That beauty must die. So melancholy lives with beauty, and beauty must die. So beauty and melancholy are interconnected. Beauty gives joy. So joy and melancholy are interconnected. And joy, whose hand is ever at his lips, bidding adieu. And he says joy is also temporary. Joy must also die. It is always ready. With his hands on his hips, it is ready to bid adieu, say farewell, goodbye. And aching pleasure nigh, turning to poison while the bee mouth sips. He says an aching pleasure, an extreme joy, that's also short-lived. And they all turn to poison while the bee mouth sips. Then he gives you the image of a bee sucking nectar from the flower. And that nectar sometimes turns into poison when the bee sucks too much. So he says these things, beauty, joy and pleasure, they can turn into poison at any time, because beauty is short-lived. So we take pleasure from beauty, we take joy from beauty, we seek happiness from beauty, but at the same time it turns to poison. At the same time it dies, it gives sorrow. And joy is never with us all the time, all our life. We must experience sadness. It leaves us and leaves us with sadness or with sad memories. So again, joy is connected to sadness, and pleasure, he says, is also short-lived. So he is evaluating the relationship between sorrow and melancholy, between sorrow, melancholy, or melancholy and joy. Then he says, in these lines, he's tried to show the mixed nature of life, how happiness and sorrow are inextricably linked. This I've discussed with you. And then in the next lines he says, I in the very temple of delight, wail melancholy has a sovereign shrine. He says, I in the very temple of delight, wail melancholy has her sovereign shrine. These are important lines. He tells you here that in the very temple of delight, melancholy has her shrine. So over the shrine, you know, temples are built. Normally shrine is like a grave. In fact, more than a grave, it's a grave which is decorated from outside, from the upper side. So it's when it becomes a shrine. So he says, and over the shrines, you know, we make temples. So in the holy temple of delight, in the holy temple of the goddess delight, delight here is, you can see, is personified. In the temple of this goddess, which is delight, he says, melancholy, this another goddess, melancholy also lives. And she, not just lives, he says she has her holy shrine. So both are holy, both are sacred, both are important, and both live at the same place. So his outward structure is that of delight. So outwardly there's happiness, delight, the goddess of delight rules, but he says she cannot rule alone. She hides inside her, or she wails inside her, the shrine of melancholy. So whoever comes to the temple of delight must also experience, or must also pay visit to the shrine of melancholy. So you see, in fact, it should be easier for us or for you to understand this concept of shrine and temple, because we normally pay visits to temples. Not exactly, we don't call them temples, but to some mosques here, like Bari Imam here, the structure of the building that has been made over the shrine. So when you pay visit to the mosque or to that place, to that structure, you are also paying visit to the shrine. So he says it's not that you accept one and leave the other, or accept one or ignore the other. He says you have to take in both. So whoever visits the goddess of delight in her temple must also pay her respects to the goddess of melancholy in her shrine, which is also there. And he describes melancholy as wailed. As wail, because he says when we are happy, when we only see delight. In the happy state, we only see delight. We don't want to think about melancholy. So melancholy stays hidden, but it is always there. So a very important concept here, because here he's unifying the two. Here he's bringing the two together. He's connecting the two together. A very, very important concept. Though seen of none save him whose strenuous tongue can burst joy's grape against his palate fine, his soul shall taste the sadness of a maid and be among her cloudy trophies hung. Now he concludes the poem, and he wants to say that only those who understand that the two are inseparable, only they can experience real happiness. He says, though seen of none save him whose strenuous tongue can burst, he says, but only a wise man can see them together. They are only seen by a few, save him, he says, and someone who's who is that person who can see the two together? He says, who can burst joy's grape against his palate fine. One who can, he's creating for you the image of that rich fruit which is grape. He says when you burst grape between your teeth, your tongue savors its taste, its deliciousness, its loveliness, and your palate also appreciates the taste. But when that it is for a while, the taste and the sense of that deliciousness that is there, and that you get it only when you burst it. When you cannot experience the actual taste, or you cannot tell what the grape tastes like until you put it between your teeth and you squeeze it. So he says someone who's courageous enough or bold enough to handle sorrow, only he can achieve complete bliss, complete happiness. So you have to have courage to experience sorrow in order to experience joy or delight. Just like you have to, you can only taste or experience the actual taste of the fruit by putting it between your teeth and squeezing it and taking its rich fluids in and enjoying it. So enjoyment is linked, or pleasure is linked to the tasting, to the bursting of the fruit. So he says, only his soul shall taste the sadness of a mite and be among her cloudy trophies hung. He says, and he will, so melancholy will hang as a trophy amongst that person's other achievements. So this would be his other achievement, that he has tasted melancholy. So here in the end he's paying tribute to melancholy. In fact, he's paying tribute to that courageous soul who's able to master melancholy, who's able to come out of melancholy, because melancholy will now lead him to joy, and he can put it as one of the trophies that he has hard earned, that he has earned through hard work and through great effort, and he can put it for everyone to see. So he is actually explained to you how both joy and sorrow can be connected, and you see how he moved in a progressive manner. And he explains that only those who embrace melancholy, only they can be happy. And he explains it to you through the image of the grape. He explains it to you through the images of the temples and the shrine. And he explains it to you through the images of nature that he creates, of the rose, and of the other objects, images of nature that he talks about. So for him, the message here is that joy and sorrow, joy and melancholy are interconnected. They are linked. One cannot be achieved without the other. In order to experience and reach the state of joy, one has to experience or pass through sorrow. And this is the realistic and the brave and the maturer approach of Keats that we find in this poem, but we find lacking in the other two odes of his, where we saw him as an escapist, where we saw him as a dreamer. So now we conclude the discussion on Keats's odes, and with this we also conclude discussion on this great period in English history, which is called Romanticism, or the Romantic period. And we discussed it in detail. In fact, I discussed some of the major works of some of the major poets of this great movement in detail, because it is a really significant period in the history of English literature, and it has left such a deep mark on the writers that followed them, and that you need to have a better understanding of the poetry that was written and produced in this age. So since I am concluding this discussion on Romanticism or the Romantic period, I am going to just recap for you some of the salient features of the Romantic movement, and then in the next lecture we will begin with the Victorian periods, and a new chapter and a new era we will start. So let's see, because I discussed with you some of these features in the opening lecture, in the very first lecture, before we embarked on a journey or on a discussion or an evaluation or analysis of the poets or their poetry. But now that you have studied those poets, now that you have studied their works, you should be able to understand the concepts of Romanticism better. And that is why I feel that I need to just recap for you, so that you can connect with them and understand them better. So the works have shown to us how Romanticism was a reaction to the changes that were taking place in the society. We saw with each one of those Romantic poets, we saw how each one of them was turning away from society and was turning towards nature. Starting from Wordsworth to Coleridge to Shelley and then to Keats, you saw that they were all, they had all turned their backs towards society, and they had all turned to face nature. And this was, as I told you, due to urbanization and industrialization. So industrialization had caused urbanization. It had resulted in cities becoming packed and dirty and ugly, and natural peace was being lost. So the Romantics, for peace, turned towards nature. Then Romanticism was also a reaction to the previous movement, was a previous era, the Enlightenment, or which was also called the intellectualism, with its emphasis on reason and on mind. So all forms, all styles, all methods, all themes of enlightenment were challenged by the Romantics. The Enlightenment period you saw, in fact, you must be able to understand better now that all these Romantics, they relied not on very flowery language. They used simple diction. Apart from the Greek images or classical myths that the images of classical myths that you may find, the language itself is not difficult. It's not a flowery or artistic, stylistic kind of a language. So they use simple language, and in themes also you see that they are totally different. And I shall discuss those themes with you later on. So they were revolting from the previous traditions. If you compare these four Romantics and their works with the works written by Pope or any other writer of the 18th century, you shall see a marked difference in their writing style. Then you see that these Romantic poets, they rebelled against the rigid social structures, especially Shelley. But you notice that they were all rebellious because they were all some way, in one way or the other, involved with the American or the French Revolution, especially the French revolutions, because it was so close to them. They had all been affected by French Revolution, and starting from Wordsworth, Coleridge, also Shelley, and then Keats also, they were shattered and disillusioned, disappointed by what they saw happening during the French Revolution. And except for Shelley, all other poets, they lost their faith in any kind of revolution brought about by humans. So they were in one way or the other disappointed by these norms or structures in the society, and they were non-materialistic. From their poetry you can understand that materialism has no role to play in their lives, so they reacted against the materialism. Special thing that I also emphasized throughout my analysis of the other poems of these poets was the new role that they give to the prophet-like role that they give to the poet. The poet is not an ordinary person. With them, the poet is distinguished by his intensity of perception and imagination. He has special feelings, he has special powers, and he has special kind of perception and special kind of imagination, and he can see into the future. He's a prophet, he is a reformer, he's a revolutionary, he is someone who can communicate with the spirit of the world, someone who understands and can look into the nature of things. So a poet is assigned a special role by these Romantics. And Romantics, we saw, they emphasize on emotion a lot. Whether it is Wordsworth or Coleridge or Shelley or Keats, emotion was primary thing with them. It was their emotions, their feeling, what they were feeling at the time, whether they were listening to the song of the nightingale or they were witnessing the storm brought about by the west wind, or they were woken up from the dream and create the vision of Xanadu, or they go into a feeling of extreme rapture and elation when they come into contact with nature and experience a mystic sense of peace or union with nature, just like Wordsworth does. So they rely on emotions, the emotion of the individual, emotion of the poet, and no reasoning. We witness no reasoning in their poetry. They don't try to reason out. And mystery rather than clarity. And they do not spell things out clearly. They don't tell you exactly and clearly this is white and this is black. There is mystery surrounded in their works. We have to look for meaning. They only suggest things. We have to discern and understand meaning, as with Keats or Shelley. Or they use a lot of metaphors, they use a lot of similes, and it is through those similes or metaphors that they try and convey their meaning. So there is mystery surrounded their work rather than clarity. Then their emphasis is on the individual rather than the society. They don't focus on the society. It is the individual soul, the individual poet, the individual person that is important. So sometimes a solitary reaper becomes the center of attention. Sometimes another object may become their attention, but society, it's only Shelley with whom the worries of the society, they play a major role. And then their rebellion. There's rebellion rather than acceptance. There's a spirit of rebellion rather than acceptance, whether it is rebellion against life, against, as with Keats, it is rebellion against, the temporariness, the transience of life, the transience of beauty, youth, and the transience of truth. So, or with Shelley, it was a rebellion against the social and the political structures of his time. Or with Coleridge, it was a rebellion against, the spirit pervading in his society, in his times, the materialism. He rebels against the values of the society and takes and saves himself in that imaginary world that he has created of supernaturalism, and where naturalism and supernaturalism are blended. Or with Wordsworth, who completely isolates himself from society. So they all live on the fringes of society. They don't live in the center of the society. They're not part of the society. They live on the outskirts. And most importantly, the role of nature in transformation of character. Each one of them believes nature can transform character. Some use nature as means of inspiration. Some use it as a vehicle for change. Some see it as a spirit. Some see it blended with supernaturalism. Some see it as as beauty. But all of them, they believe in the transformation power of nature. And as for nature, like Wordsworth, for him nature was man's intellectual and spiritual growth. For Coleridge, the nature there's a supernatural aspect of nature also. So nature is not, the supernatural aspect is not separate from nature. And he talks about poets' imagination as a creative power. Then for Shelley, it was a vehicle for change. It was a source of inspiration. And for Keats, we saw that it was a means to escape into the other world. He also uses it as a vehicle. He also uses it as a source of change, but to escape from this world and the change of state of mind from this world to the other world. So with all these romantic poets, we saw how rich in ideas, in style, in themes their poems were, and how each one of them brought his own individuality how each one of them brought his own emotions, how each one of them brought his own creative spirit into the work, and each one of them added a new leaf to this great movement, which is called the Romantic movement. And the Romantic movement is enriched because of the contribution made by each of the Romantic poets who was great. Each one of them was a great poet in his own capacity.